Before we get to today's video, I do want to share some really exciting news. Thank you guys so much for watching these videos. I started making these videos just because I was spending so much time DMing people and answering questions online and DMs and things like that. And I just wanted actually to just save myself some time. So I started making videos with, the things that are common questions. I really never dreamed that it would take off like it has. And last week I crossed the threshold of being able to monetize my channel, which is a super big deal. I don't know what I'm doing because, again, I didn't really set out with that intention. So I am going to have to figure out how all of this works. I know that there are channel memberships, there's other things. I don't know what I'm going to do yet. I am trying to figure out what strikes a balance between still being really helpful but being compensated for my time in a way that makes me continue to put out these videos and help people. So bear with me while I figure that out. The one thing I have decided to go ahead and start doing is a weekly live on Sunday afternoons. And so at the live, if you have questions about moving here that maybe are a little too specific for a video, I will be just kind of chatting and answering whoever shows up, answering their questions. But it will be Sunday afternoons because I feel like that's when the majority of my audience, especially in the US, is available with all of the different time zones and my time zone. So that's the exciting news. Let's get into today's video. So one thing about Uruguay that if you are interested in it, unless you have family here or you've been here before, the reason it shows up on most people's radar right now is that many people who are trying to leave the US are looking for a more progressive country. And if you start Googling, if you start looking up lists of progressive countries, Uruguay is going to be on those lists. I mean, some of the lists are very, very like Eurocentric, but if you have a true worldwide list, Uruguay is going to be up in the top 5 if it's a fair list. So that's why many people will start looking into moving here. And it's true, it is one of the most progressive countries in the world. But I think that what is sometimes happening when I talk to people from the US is that when they hear, okay, progressive country, they think, oh, okay, so it's going to be like Portland or San Francisco. And it's really, really not. So it's a very, very nuanced, interesting culture. And I do want to make a video about this just because I think, I actually got the idea for this video from a comment I got on one of my videos that was actually kind of ugly. But it was somebody asking, or somebody saying, oh, okay, so basically it's New York, California, great, I'm not going to move there. Okay. And I was snarky in my reply in saying, no, it's actually a different country. Hope this helps. Because I get very annoyed when people from the US just have no level of nuance when it comes to other countries. I get a little bit irritated with that. So I was a little bit snarky. But this comment got me thinking, you know what? It isn't, though. It is its own separate place. And I really want to talk about that today. So I am going to give some, I love to do like facts, data, but I also, this video is probably going to be a lot more heavily weighted in my opinion and just the vibes I feel here than my other videos. Because, there's just not data about this stuff. It's a cultural kind of feeling. If you are Uruguayo and I say something and you're like, that's completely wrong, she doesn't know what she's talking about, like, leave a comment and I will pin your comment. If I get something wrong, please tell me. because it's been a couple years, but I've only scratched the tip of the iceberg, and I recognize that. But I do want to talk about this because if you come here thinking, oh, it's going to be Portland, or oh, it's going to be San Francisco, you might find it difficult. Like there's aspects of it that are still, there's aspects of this culture that are still pretty conservative. So let's talk about it. I'm going to start out. Okay, so I'm going to break the video down like this. I'm going to give you like the credentials for why I say it's a progressive country. This is going to be the facts section of our video. Then I'm going to talk about why it's progressive and some of the history behind some of the laws and the culture. And then I'm going to wrap up the video with some of the societal norms and manners and cultural expectations here. Because to me, that is what, you know, you can be a trans woman with blue hair and tattoos everywhere, and nobody's going to look at you twice. That's not why anybody would judge you here. But if you have bad manners, then you are going to have a hard time. They're going to be like, ugh, that lady was rude, you know? So I think that it's important to realize that just because it's progressive and accepting different sexualities and different things like that, prioritizing healthcare and safety nets, things like that, doesn't mean that it doesn't have a cohesive societal norm. And I think it's really important to understand that norm and understand that culture, and not move here expecting that you're going to be accepted no matter what. Does that make sense? So let's start with the progressive credibility. So, you know, Uruguay was the first country in the world to legalize recreational marijuana in 2013. Here it is something that I wouldn't say that it's something everybody does. Like I don't really partake. Most of the people I know don't partake, but if you're walking down the street, you'll smell it. Like it's also not like hidden. It's not illegal. It's, you know, pretty out and open and accepted. Healthcare is a right specified in the Constitution. And so there is a government healthcare system. If somebody cannot pay for healthcare, they are still going to receive necessary treatment. And if you have a job here, you are going to be enrolled into the FONASA healthcare system and get, it is not free, but it is, if you're comparing it to US healthcare prices, it is basically free. Uruguay, when it comes to LGBTQ rights, has been like a worldwide leader. They decriminalized being gay in 1933. So like pre-World War II, which is really, I mean, that's really early compared to a lot of other countries. After the dictatorship, since 1985, there's been no censorship of LGBTQ materials, art, things like that. There has been a law protecting LGBTQ people from discrimination since 2003. And in 2018, there was a law that was passed to protect trans people, to make sure they have the right to change their name, that they have the right to gender affirming care, that gender affirming care within the government hospital system. It even specifically protects gender affirming care for minors, which if you're from the US, you know that's an issue right now up there. It's very comprehensive. It even gave reparations to trans people who were harmed in the dictatorship. I mean, that is a tiny group of people, but just even the fact that it was included, I think, is really indicative of how progressive this nation really is. There are just a lot of things in like the social safety net When my daughter was in the ICU for a week, I actually had like a employee from the I almost said hotel, an employee from the hospital came to our room, because I just asked the nurse, like, how long do you think it's going to be? Because I need to tell my boss when I'm going to be back to work. And they sent somebody from the hospital to explain my rights to me, to say, yeah, your boss absolutely cannot make you go to work because you have a child in the hospital, and here's the note. And I was like, this is unnecessary because I have a great boss, and I wasn't actually worried about that. But it was good to know that, like, it's protected, it's there. So there's a lot of safety nets. There's a lot of ways that it's progressive, especially for Latin America. It's wildly progressive for Latin America. So some of the reasons why, that's like the biggest question I get, because it's like, okay, so it's right in the middle of South America, but it's just this like haven, right? Half of the country is non-religious, so we don't have the same effect on politics regarding religion. Actually, in the early 1900s, the president Jose Bache y Ordóñez, sorry if I said that terribly, but that's the best I can do. He, first of all, he added a lot of social safety nets back in the early 1900s, but he also secularized the country. So he even, did some things like, okay, marriage is now through the state, it's not through the church, some things like that. The society became very secular. The religious aspect, or more correctly, the non-religious aspect, is there. The other side is, I think that it's a very well-educated society. The literacy rate here is 96%. That's by far the highest in Latin America. And it's been a well-educated society for a really long time. So my kids are in public primary school here, and there's a day in the school year early on where they celebrate Jose Pedro Varela. I don't know. Again, sorry, I'm doing my best. He started the public school system, and he really was like the champion of making sure that every child has access to school. And it's also compulsory. So homeschool is not allowed. There are some court cases going through where some people are trying to find some loopholes in that. But like by and large, people do not homeschool. You go to public school, or there are private schools, but you have to go to school in some way. Teachers are super respected, and education is valued across the country. So one of the things I really like, and I teach for Ceibal, I teach English, and I teach to like middle school age, 8th grade, 9th grade kids. And the program I teach in, actually, I teach virtually, because the idea of the program is that every child in the country, no matter where they live, even if they're way, way, way in the interior, they should have the opportunity to like have English lessons with a native English speaker. Because like obviously most native English speakers are going to be in Montevideo or maybe in Maldonado, but probably they are not going to be in like Paso de los Toros, right? In the very middle of the country. And so my program, I get to do virtual lessons. So there's a big, big push here that rural kids should have equal educational opportunities. And I really find that really interesting. I think it's really cool. I think it's why just across the board, the literacy rate is high. The education level is really high. So, I mean, again, that we know, especially here in the last couple of decades, that the split between conservative and progressive really tends to be education level. And that has happened in the US. It used to be rural versus urban in the US, and it's really switched to the more education you have, the more likely you are to be progressive. So it makes sense to me that with the emphasis on education here, people are more progressive. I also think there's just a cultural value in supporting each other and helping each other. There's a lot less of the like me selfishness. And so I think that it's easier to implement those policies and give everybody their rights and give those social safety nets and things like that. Okay, so that was like the background to it. Let's talk about some of the societal norms and manners because, again, you're not going to be ostracized here for being gay, lesbian, trans by most people. Of course, in any country, there's going to be people. And when I talk to trans advocates here, they say more, the bigger problem that trans people face in Uruguay is acceptance by their family, not society as a whole. So there is still some work to do in that area. But by and large, it's not going to be your gender identity or your sexual orientation or something like that that is going. What's going to make you feel kind of ostracized is going to be if you cannot fit into the cultural and societal norms of this country. So it's a small country. There's 3 million people here. There's 4 cows for every person, right? So everybody knows everybody. Like you can play a game with anyone in Uruguay and it's like the Kevin Bacon game, right? Like we can connect somehow. We will know somebody in common, right? So that kind of lends itself to a society that has pretty strong norms and expectations of each other. Like that's kind of why I think people have a lot higher degree of trust, even with strangers. And people just, you're not going to just be a jerk to somebody because it's a small country. Like you're probably going to see them often or somebody they know, you know what I mean? So people just behave, I feel like, a lot better. Like, I don't think in 2 years I've ever seen a Karen moment here. Like, even a slight bit. I mean, people will complain and people are like, this is what I need, but not in the same way as you see in the US sometimes. Okay, so let's talk about, I'm going to actually try to address those in depth. The first one is small talk. So I do say this when I'm having consultations with people. If you are like a very introverted, very shy person who doesn't like to talk to people, you are really going to struggle here because everybody makes small talk. Everywhere I go, if I'm like waiting on the bus and there's like a lady next to me, we'll probably start talking. If you are, checking out at the store, at the very, very minimum, you're going to say, buen dia, ¿cómo andas? Something, right? And then afterwards, gracias, que tenga buen dia, something like that. Like you are definitely like having a small little interaction. And if you don't, people kind of are like, what's wrong with that person? Even at like a devoto or something like that, like everyone chit chats. So you kind of have to just be aware that that's going to happen. And this also applies. This was for me, I'm so glad because my boss actually like directly told me this because sometimes I need things like directly explained to me. For me, because I'm a millennial and I didn't grow up texting, I got like text, our first iPhones were after I already graduated college. So I didn't really grow up texting. And so in my mind, texting is very like direct. And I still am very utilitarian about texting. Like I'll just be like, hey, let's meet at this time. Or like, here's the address, let's do this. I was communicating with my boss this way because also like it's work too. And I don't know. I have like a little bit more formal thing with work, which doesn't fit here. People are pretty informal even at work. But my boss was like, hey, here, she's like, I'm not bothered, but here, people have the same amount of small chat by text as they would in person. And so if you just text somebody like directly, like, what time is the thing tonight? It's like super rude. And I was like, oh my God, I'm so sorry. She's like, no, I know, because I know you, I know you're not trying to be rude, but just FYI. And so, and then I started noticing it. So it's like, good morning, like, buen dia, ¿cómo estás? And then, you get to your point. Like, actually separate texts. Not like, good morning, here's what I want to say. Separate texts. Good morning. How are you? I hope you are feeling better because you were sick last week. What lesson are we starting with? Like, you need to send those in like separate texts. And like, I'm just glad she told me that because I didn't know. So there's like all these little things like that you still have to learn, and you still have to, comply with that. Another thing to know is people here are very physically affectionate. Very physically affectionate. Greeting is kissing on the cheek. Even the lady who like opened my bank account, like to greet me, kiss me on the cheek. Like, I don't know this person, we're in a bank and we're kissing on the cheek, right? So knowing that, I mean, if you have a severe problem with kissing on the cheek and people know that you're a foreigner, you can maybe get away with it. My daughter got away with it at first. Like, she would like just like do a high five or a fist bump. But even she, after a while, she was like, it's just easier to just hug people because it feels awkward not to do that. So kind of know, like, that's the expectation. But even beyond that, like, people stand really close to each other. If you're talking to somebody, they are going to be like much closer than they would stand to you in the US. There is just a lot higher levels of just people kind of just having their arm around each other, or like, I teach middle school, and my middle school boys will be like cuddling, during class, like have their heads on each other's shoulders. And that's like super normal. And so if you are kind of like awkward about that, you're going to stand out. The next thing I want to point out, and this one's super nuanced, and I think it's might be difficult for me to explain well, but people here are extremely generous. People are so happy to help you, give you things, like, but it's like a generosity without arrogance. So it's not like, oh, the check comes, I'm going to show off by paying for the meal. That would be like kind of weird behavior, I think. I mean, I'm going to say this in my circles, like, we're heavily just very middle class. I mean, maybe it's different in upper classes, I don't know. But if I try to take the check, no, I'm going to pay, I mean, I wouldn't have any friends. People would be like, what, you think you're better than me? So it's, generosity is important, but you have to be very careful not to offend by being like, having an arrogant, oh, I'm a foreigner, let me just pay for this. You kind of have to walk a little bit of a line. That's my opinion. I could be wrong, but I had a situation where I was at like a dinner party thing, and it was low budget. It was like at a pizza place. But the person who had invited me, like, he was picking up the check, and I was like trying to reimburse him something, and I was like, no, please, we ate, like, there's 4 of us, come on. And we had like this back and forth, and and then I thought later, oh my gosh, what if I did something culturally wrong? Like, maybe I insisted too much. And I asked my other Uruguayan friend, like, what the norm is. And he was like, well, no, if you were being arrogant and like, no, I'm going to pay for everything because like I have plenty of money, da da da, then they would have thought. But if you are just genuinely kind of like, no, 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 I want to pay my share, like you shouldn't pay for all of this, then you're okay. So kind of um, keeping that in mind, like having friendships that are, you're generous with each other, but not over the top. Here, relationships are key. Relationships are key for everything, for work, for getting something repaired, getting an appliance technician, like finding a dentist. Like people really value relationships above everything. So you need connections. And again, it's such a small country. That's why I think like culturally people are kinder and less likely to start a beef or like get mad because they are relying on connections at all times. So fostering relationships is really, really important. And then just like another silly thing is the dinner time is 9 is like early and 10 is more normal, like 10 p.m., 9 p.m. So if you are wanting to make friends and go out and things, you need to adapt to eating later. I mean, they do this because they have a merienda that's like kind of like a tea time or like an afternoon snack later in the day. So, they have breakfast, lunch, merienda, dinner. And of course, people drink mate all day, so they have a lot of energy. But, kind of just knowing if you insist on an earlier dinner, you're going to be a little bit weird to people here. Now, if you go out with other immigrants who are from the U.S., you can eat at 7 and you'll be there waiting for the restaurant to open. Okay, that's like just kind of some random manners and social norms that I could think of. Values here, like respect for others is really important. So and especially being respectful to older people. Like I've noticed, like in the grocery stores that I go in. I mean, I go in like little tiny corner stores, but like if an older lady brings something up, often she'll just walk straight up and cut the line if it's just young people waiting, and everybody is like, yep, that's fine. There's some respect for older people, and then just kind of a general respect for other people. Education, again, highly valued. I just want to keep reiterating that because if you have kids, it's respecting the teachers, respecting the school is like a big part of getting your kids acclimated to the country. Education being highly valued also means, like, a lot of times I will see on some of the expat groups on Facebook that, oh, you can't get a job here. They don't hire foreigners. They only hire Uruguayans. And I'm like, no, it's not exactly that. That's too simplistic. It's more that the population here is already very well educated and experienced and qualified. So they're just hiring the most qualified person usually, but the people here are very qualified. So you're competing with other qualified people. And there also is that relationship aspect too. So an Uruguayan who's very well qualified and has connections is objectively a better employee to hire than somebody who just moved here. So, you kind of have to think about it that way. So being educated, valuing education, valuing relationships, building community is really, really important. Okay. So that's like kind of across the board manners and social norms. This section is going to be specifically for people who are parenting or caregiving for children, because I think parenting here is wildly different than the US. I do talk about this a little bit in the Moving Abroad with Kids, but I did want to touch on it a little more here because I think it's important to recognize that you need to change your parenting style. You need to make sure you're matching the values and the norms of the country you're in so that your kids can acclimate and be accepted by their peers. And, you know, definitely, like, I can see if my kids were just terrible at school, or if I was like weird or doing something not appropriate, my kids, like, the other parents would be like, don't be friends with that kid. You know, you want to make a good impression. You want your kids to be able to fit in, and you have to fit in with the other parents to make that happen. I mean, I think that's pretty universal, but really, really here, especially if you're a foreigner coming to live here, people are like, I mean, not suspicious is the wrong word, but like cautious maybe. Like, I want to make sure that this person is gonna fit in with our, with our group. So I think it's important to make that effort. Kids here are valued and adored, like, pretty much by everyone. Everyone's really sweet to kids. They love kids. They dote on kids. Like, when we go eat, the waiters always, oh, hey, welcome, hug them, bring them some little special treat, something like that. So kids are very much adored, and they are allowed to be kids. Like, they're allowed to be somewhat a little more rambunctious, a little more noisy. Anytime I've kind of been like apologizing because my kids are being a little bit loud, people are usually like, tranqui, son niños, no pasa nada. It's fine, like, calm down. They're kids, they're supposed to be loud. But there's a difference between kind of being a little bit bouncy at the table or being a little bit loud at the table and like running around the restaurant or being so loud that you disturb other people or, things like that, spilling a bunch of stuff. So it's kind of like, they can be kids, but there's definitely, like, if they're running around wild and they don't have manners, that's not going to be okay. And then also, like, teaching them to, like, greet the waiter, speak to the waiter is important too. So, kids here, it's really, really interesting. The parenting style and just the way I see kids here, they tend to be like a lot more calm than most kids I know in the US. Like, they're just kind of like, I think just something's in the water. The people here are calm, but they're still kids. You know what I mean? Like, they're not like perfectly obedient all the time. So it's kind of, though, if you are moving here and you're going to let your kids just be crazy and wild, people probably won't say anything to you, but you're definitely not going to be fitting in well with people. Does that make sense? And it doesn't matter. You could have a trans kid. You could be gay and bring your kids out. Nobody's going to care about you being gay and having kids, and nobody's going to care if your kid is trans or you're trans. But if your kids are being menaces, then they're going to judge. They're going to be like... But yeah, my kid's teacher says, que falta de cultura. Like, when they're misbehaving, any kids in the class, or when the class is misbehaving, she'll dramatically say, you're missing culture. Why aren't you acting like you have any culture? You have any manners, So just keep that in mind. So yeah, that's kind of the I think that's everything I wanted to introduce. My purpose with these videos is to try to really portray accurately what it's like to live here. And I have gotten a little bit worried as things are going on up there in the Northern Hemisphere and people are coming here. I'm getting a little bit worried that people are reading the word progressive and reading a lot of things into that from the US, where I think that It's not the US, it's its own country. It's got its own style, it's got its own culture. And it's just this weird mix of some parts of the culture are like extremely progressive, and then some things are still very traditional. And that's actually my favorite part of it. Like, I actually kind of love that, you know, there, you really don't need like a bunch of LGBTQ groups, because you're just part of society, right? There's no, you don't need to band together like in the US. You're accepted, like you're in the neighborhood, you're part of the community. That part of your life isn't what defines you. And so those groups exist, but they're not like as, like in the US, you have to be a part of those. You don't here. You can just live your life just as you are, and go through life. Again, but you can't be a jerk. Like, you have to have good manners. You have to understand the culture. You have to follow the unspoken societal rules. So I hope that this video helps. I hope that I was able to get across my point. I kind of feel like I was a little bit rambly, and because I don't have like a lot of facts, and it was more my opinions, I hope that I didn't drone on too much. If you have any questions, and again, if you're a Uruguayo and you're like, this crazy lady is totally wrong and here's why, like, leave a comment below. That's fine. And then I will start doing the Sunday afternoon lives. If you want to come and ask questions, I will post the time and everything on my channel. Okay, great. Talk to you later. Bye.